Particularly for simulated qualifying runs.
Yes, I mean, for me this is one of the most exciting sessions of the whole weekend. It's the point where teams begin to show their hand, and then we go into that 1 hour of qualifying, which is going to be absolutely blinding, and you can be pretty much guaranteed each of the teams are going to do 4 runs of 1 timed lap per run. It's going to be very busy on the circuit. If conditions stay like this, it's going to suit some more than others, but nevertheless, when it comes to qualifying, drivers put that qualifying chip into their brain, different to the race chip. And you do your 1 flying lap per set of tyres. You take your heart in your mouth half the time anyway, but it doesn't have to produce some stunning pictures.
It does, looking forward to that. The track itself, from a driver's point of view, there are a few opportunities where a driver can make a difference. We've been talking about how crucial the aerodynamics are, and that is absolutely right. You're not going to overcome that. But in terms of the battle with your teammate, there's a couple of opportunities here where bravery and commitment perhaps might gain you a few hundredths.
Possibly there are, but of course at the end of the day, if your car hasn't got the aero performance, I mean, there's only so much of it you can carry, and we've seen throughout Friday, and to maybe a lesser extent this morning, because the air is cooler, it's more dense, so I think people are getting slightly false aerodynamic performances from their car. If it was another 10 degrees warmer, we would probably see the people that were struggling yesterday pretty much struggling today. But we have to take the track conditions, the air temperature, track temperature as they are. They're still in the middle teens, around 15, 16 Celsius. And unless that suddenly breaks up dramatically at the end of this session at 11 o'clock, and the 2 hours then between the end of session and beginning of qualifying, I mean, if it would be great in a way if it did, because it would throw into confusion all the work that the teams would have done here this morning.
Patrick Lemarié, the test driver for BAR, one of the test drivers. Anthony Davidson, of course, the British driver, has been doing quite a lot of testing. He was up at Silverstone last week, and Anthony not currently racing in Formula 3 or Formula 3000. He's focused entirely on this job testing for BAR.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea, because if you mix and match junior Formula with Formula 1 testing, it usually ends up that your junior Formula suffers, and also I think it's the adaptation back into Formula 1. Totally different levels of horsepower, that's obvious, but different levels of grip from the chassis as well as the braking, and you've just got to keep your mind focused. Remember, a young Finn back in '93 did that with McLaren. That was Mika Häkkinen. He went on to win 2 world championships with that team. So I think that, you know, it's easy to say, well, you must stay racing. If the team are able to give you sufficient mileage as a test driver, that's the way to go for sure.
Mark Webber last year was test driver for the Benetton team, as it was, and also competing in Formula 3000. I know he made comments several times just how hard it was to adapt from one to the other, and yet obviously he's very rapid in whichever car. It was that transition from one back to the other that he did find difficult.
Yeah, and I think that it does affect you, particularly in a formula like 3000, where there is a limited amount of testing available anyway. You get relatively short practice sessions before you qualify, and you've just got to get your head dialed in immediately into Formula 3000, and probably 3000 maybe more so than Formula 3, where there's a lot of testing, particularly in the British series. They're testing quite regularly.
By the way, just to let you know, Sebastian Bourdais is on pole position for this afternoon's Formula 3000 race here at Barcelona, and the Frenchman could be one of the next stars of Formula 1 because he's doing extremely well in this year's championship.
Well, there's our weather chart, and we see that the humidity, which is up to 82% when the cars went out on track at 9 o'clock this morning, is gradually beginning to drop, but it's not dropping quickly enough, in my opinion, that we wait to see what will happen over the 2.5 hours or so that remain before qualifying does start. And well, there's a man who was pretty happy yesterday and had a bit of fun in the press conference, poking fun at his old team boss Eddie Jordan. And it's amazing the change that occurs in a team when they suddenly pop up on merit rather than just maybe through circumstance to the more interesting end of the grid. That's the front end.
It's almost a year since Arrows scored their last point. That was for Jos Verstappen in Austria last year. He finished in 6th position. Well, they would love to be able to get some points on the board here this weekend. So the second session of free practice is underway. It's already considered as one session with that half an hour break in between, and now everybody taking to the track once again, as we see the Sauber drivers preparing to come out as well. Nick Heidfeld has been running fairly quickly today so far. He was 5th fastest this morning, and with the Bridgestone tyres, a Ferrari engine, that Sauber could be one to watch this afternoon, particularly in that battle with McLaren and Renault, and maybe even Williams if they don't get their act together.
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting situation to have a team like Sauber mixing and matching it on merit with McLaren and Williams. I mean, the Renault team has been moving forward all year, and they're right in there kicking and shoving. So you've got 5 teams squabbling over the top 6 places, more so for the points in Sunday's Grand Prix. And what's that going to do to the teams like BAR, Jordan and Arrows, who have yet to score a point? We talked about that yesterday, and it is something that both or all 3 teams have got to take on board. There is the possibility that neither 3 teams could score a single point. I mean, to me that's an appalling thought, that Jordan, BAR or even Arrows couldn't score a single point, but they've got to face that reality.
The last few years here in Barcelona have seen a lot of finishers in both races. Actually, we've had about 16 finishers. Maybe it's a product of the amount of testing the teams do here, so they have a handle on what tends to go wrong and get it fixed before they come to the racetrack. It is a little bit bumpy. There are undulations on the track. You don't tend to see them too much from the onboard cameras or even watching the cars around, but they're little ripples, aren't they?
Yes, it's a little bit like a washboard effect, and those are very destabilising for a driver, for a car. It affects how the aerodynamics respond with the circuit. But fundamentally, it's a very, very good circuit, and as long as everybody can find the perfect aerodynamic package, then we should be in for a cracking Grand Prix.
Ralf Schumacher then in the Williams, putting in some early laps in this restarted session, the final 45-minute session before they prepare the cars for qualifying this afternoon. And as we see, track conditions, weather conditions, somewhat different to yesterday. We haven't seen that beautiful blue sky that we saw in Friday free practice that gave us some stunning pictures. The colours just seem to bounce off the screen. Today it's a little duller, but with that high humidity, that may work in some teams' favour as they get a little bit more downforce out of the car. Of course, it's the same for everyone, so Ferrari still gaining a bit more downforce as well.
Yes, I mean, this problem of the Michelin tyre not liking the cooler temperatures, that is slightly offset with the possibility that because the aerodynamics of the car might generate maybe 1 or 2% more downforce, might encourage a little bit more tyre temperature than you'd expect in those cooler conditions. One of those sort of balances between downforce, speed in the straight. Of course, high speed in the straight will generate load in the tyres as well, which contributes to maybe tyre temperatures rising above what you'd expect in these ambient temperatures.
This was Ralf a moment ago, just putting a wheel over the curb and getting it a little out of shape. He got that gathered together without too many problems. And Pedro de la Rosa, Spain's only current Formula One racing driver, although we have 2 test drivers in Fernando Alonso and Marc Genet, but certainly Pedro would like to see some better performance from his Jaguar to try and encourage perhaps a few more Spanish fans to come along, although there's been a lot of work at this track over the winter in terms of adding seats, and there's now some 68,000 I think grandstand seats around this track.
Yes, we saw Nick Heidfeld go out earlier. He's actually seen a small improvement in his time. He still stays 5th quickest behind Ralf Schumacher, but that gap is down to now about a 1/10 of a second as 3rd quickest this morning David Coulthard sets off on what is his first timed lap of this second part of a 45-minute Saturday morning practice.
Let's watch the car a little bit. Yesterday he was running wide, couldn't seem to get the car turned in. Now down towards the tight left-hander. Lakaixi, notice how he goes right in from the full outside of the track. He was almost on the white line turning in, and then coming through. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, he turned in, he got an apex, but he couldn't hold the car in the front. Started just to slide outwards, and again that's been a lot of the problem I felt that David has had to deal with all weekend. We saw him struggle massively on Friday. It appeared a lot better this morning, but there, going through that corner, just the front wouldn't bite.
They're using fairly worn tyres. Raikkonen not going that quickly a moment ago, and we just have to wait for them to start putting new tyres on later on in this session. Now, here's Jenson Button, and there's been quite a lot in the press since the last race, of course, about who's best British driver now. Jenson Button now, of course, running very well in the championship. He's had a couple of 4th. And everybody getting very excited about this battle that's going on between Jenson and David. How do you see it?
Well, there is no battle going on between Jenson and David. It's only going on in the minds of the scribes that write for the tabloids and for the broadsheets. They're looking for anything to hang their hat on, that Jenson Button is now going to be Britain's leading Grand Prix challenger. You know, Jenson's done a stunning job this year, as has the Renault team. David Coulthard, McLaren are having a more difficult time. But in terms of out-and-out speed and ability, right now there's not much to pick and choose between them. For sure, he is the future. Jenson Button is our future lead Grand Prix driver. We need more young British drivers coming into Formula One. David's at the peak of his career. He's only beginning to climb towards a peak.
Peter, I think you've got a comment to make on this.
Well, I have, just totally to agree with what John just said. I think it's absolutely ludicrous, this who's the best British driver business, because no one was saying last year Jenson Button's the second best British driver. Isn't it fantastic or isn't it terrible? It's just that DC's having a bad run at the moment, so yeah, let's put the pressure on him in the classic British sort of Fleet Street tradition. You've got a hero, let's build him up and then destroy him. David Gower, Ian Botham, David Coulthard probably.
Well, he certainly has to deal with that. He has to deal with a lot at the moment, David, with a car that really isn't allowing him to challenge the front runners. That's what it comes down to. The McLaren Mercedes package, however you want to describe it, whatever the problems are, it's not allowing him to challenge the Ferraris up front.
And you know, it's sort of inevitable and almost sort of ironic that David Coulthard, now that he's managed to lose his former teammate Mika Hakkinen, he's gone off to a sabbatical, I call it retirement. That David you would have thought had a clear run at being the lead driver in the McLaren Mercedes-Benz team, and looking towards having a great year where he could really challenge for a world championship, and having to wake up to the reality that the performance of the McLaren Mercedes package is not sufficiently good to take that challenge to the leaders right now, who are Ferrari.
Yeah, a quick point, John. You have to say that Mika must be looking at the whole thing from his bedroom or from wherever he happens to be watching the TV monitors and thinking, well, that wasn't a bad decision to take my sabbatical, because perhaps this year's car simply wouldn't have given me the chance to show what I can do.
But I think also Mika just was beaten up and worn out and worn down. He needed to get away from it, and I think when a driver has done so much, has made such a commitment over many years as Mika Hakkinen did to his team, you could see in the 2000 season that there was just something not the same as it was in 98, 99. And in fact, in 2001, in spite of winning Grand Prix, he should have won this Grand Prix. He led until the very last lap. The performances were only coming when he felt he had a chance to win.
Big lift in the middle of the corner for Kimi Raikkonen there, just not getting the grip. Peter, what do you reckon in terms of Mika Hakkinen? Do you think we'll see him come back to Grand Prix racing?
I don't think we will, Ben, no, because I think the only team that he would logically come back with would be McLaren. Unless, one has to say that right now, if heaven forbid something happened to one of the top drivers and he was out for, say, 7 races, and Mika Hakkinen put his hand up and said, I'm available, then yes, I think he would come back tomorrow. But putting that exceptional circumstance to one side, I think the only team he could come back with would be McLaren. And I think the only guy logically he would be replacing would be DC. And I don't think Mika's stupid enough to want to come back and race against Kimi Raikkonen now. 2 fins together, I just don't think he would do that. So unless something extraordinary happens, I don't think he will come back, but of course maybe wrong.
Well, we shall wait and see. We're just watching some pretty impressive pictures, having said that, with Kimi Raikkonen.
Yeah, Raikkonen right on the edge, but so is somebody else. That's Felipe Massa, who's gone personal best in the first 2 sectors. As you see, Massa comes across the line now, and he goes up to 4th place. I mean, this young kid is just incorrigible. Every time he's in the car, he's just driving the wheels off it. And right now, he's gone quicker than his own teammate Heidfeld. Heidfeld 6th quickest on 19.4. Massa 4th quickest on 19.0.
Brilliant stuff once again from the man who celebrated his 21st birthday here on Thursday, and now looking to try and qualify this afternoon inside the top 10 if he possibly can. He has one top 10. He was 9th on the grid in Melbourne for his first Grand Prix, and look at the way he's pushing that car. Very, very good indeed at the moment.
And again, Ben, in that first sector, a further improvement. Now he's only got to find literally 100th of a second to put himself into 3rd place. David Coulthard's currently residing there. Coulthard not able to respond in the pits. Look at Massa come through La Casa, kicks the car into the corner, the back end steps out, puts the lock on, foot never lifts off the throttles.
Good stuff from the Brazilian, and he's always attacking, and indeed he's on another personal best on that middle sector as well. So this should be a further improvement for Felipe Massa. He's currently 4th fastest behind David Coulthard, but he comes in.
Well, now, the team have called him in. Clearly they want to do something to the car. They see that Massa was making, another very, very quick lap. I suppose if you were really down in the pit lane and you're saying, oh yeah, well, the reason he didn't finish that lap was because he didn't have enough fuel on board.
Maybe not. Maybe they were running a real qualifying simulation, and they didn't want him to run out of fuel on the next lap.
At the moment they're okay. Nothing for diesel on. What's the difference? Why do you prefer these ones?
So Jano prefers something, but we're not quite sure what. And we're just listening in a little bit to the radio. Juan Pablo Montoya now coming through Elf corner into the right hand at Renault. Climbs quite steeply uphill. It's a blind turn in as well to that corner. Heavy commitment into it. You really take a lot of speed into that corner, and then it all levels out. You're at the top of the hill effectively now, and just starting to come back down again.
Yeah, but 0.6 of a second away, and the first section of 22 seconds is a bunch of time, and again indicative of the problems Montoya's finding here in Barcelona this weekend. Again, listen to the engine note, to the commitment. Listen. I mean, having to wait until he can see the exit of the corner. He's not able to get on the power early enough to really drive the car through.
Oh, look at that. He has a big moment under braking into the left hand at Lacaixa.
Copy that. Remember, call your brake.
Well, that was a fit of the head staggers if you ever saw it. Montoya very, very late on the brakes as he came into Lacaixa. The car went one way, then the other. Talks to the team. In you come, my son. Let's have a look at and see what we can do to improve the package for you.
Onboard camera here, just behind the front wing on Montoya's car.
We do have DC activity on our side here. I think it's come back now, that's why he started the lap.
Now he's back in, and hopefully they can sort out any problems that he may have. So, at the moment, just under half an hour to go in this session. It's still the Ferraris that have set the pace this morning. That was from the earlier 45-minute session. Barrichello fastest from this man, Michael Schumacher, the difference 0.4 of a second. Coulthard third. Felipe Massa's moved up to fourth in this second session. Ralf Schumacher fifth, Heidfeld sixth, Raikkonen seventh, Button eighth, Montoya ninth, and Enrique Bernoldi in 10th with his teammate Heinz-Harald Frentzen 11th. The two BARs next up, then the Jordan of Fisichella, the Renault of Trulli, and then the other Jordan of Takuma Sato.
On board with Rubens Barrichello. Look at those front tyres, particularly the left front. There's a lot of wear on the inside shoulder, and Rubens again decides time to come in. So as Rubens comes in, Michael, his teammate, has gone back out on circuit. Every time you come in, you should really run to the limit. So just get used to coming to this pit lane, know where precisely to brake to get down to the speed limit. It's all good practice for Sunday.
Yes, likely to be a two-stop race here in Barcelona. That tends to be the plan on most previous occasions. Occasionally we've seen a three-stop race in the past, some years ago, but in the last few years it tends to be two stops. Heidfeld comes out of that final turn, and his teammate, remember, now fourth fastest, Nick across the line. He's sixth currently, but there's no improvements on that lap. And sounds like he's being called back in at the end of this one.
Yeah, Heidfeld was just 3/10 of a second down on that last lap compared to what he's achieved so far today. And we've still got the two Saubers, fourth for Felipe Massa and sixth for Nick Heidfeld. Rubens. Well, those tyres maybe looked more worn when you saw them from the onboard camera, but let's look at the left-hand one and see how much wear there is. And that's been removed. And the Bridgestone engineers are just taking temperatures off it, and they'll check the tread depth. Michael starts a lap.
So, is he going to be as rapid as we saw earlier on? Look at that front tyre.
Well, there you go. That's on one of the BARs, and that's as close to getting to being as slick on the inside half of the tyre as you can get. And look at the back of the Ferrari, the way Michael can lean on the car. That's what gives the Ferrari drivers the confidence they can open the throttle. They have a small amount of understeer, but it's the attitude of the car that enables them to open up those throttles.
Now, watch him down into the left-hander here. Traction control working quite hard. You can hear the noise of the engine sort of cutting out a little bit. Now the quick right-hander coming up. Now that looked very stable through there once again for Michael Schumacher. Let's watch the second split time. These tyres are likely, as we know, these tyres have done quite a few laps already, but he's still only 3/10 down on that split that was set by Barrichello earlier.
And again, the same problem. You can't get the front of the car, you can't get it tucked in. You're always struggling for grip.
Through the final turn. did look as though he was struggling a little bit to get it into those final right-handers. 18.408 though for Michael Schumacher, and that is a slight improvement, a very fractional improvement on his previous best. So once again, they're so consistent in the 1-minute 18s, and no one else has got into the 1:18s. David Coulthard the closest on a 1-minute 19.075.
And Coulthard just about to go out on track as we look into the Renault garage, and then flick back to see Ruben's face. So David Coulthard, the lead Michelin runner on the McLaren Mercedes. And well, we've got some 24, just over 24 minutes remaining in this session. Probably still a bit early for everybody to show their final hand before we have that 2-hour break before qualifying begins at 1 o'clock. And Mika Salo explaining to Peter Windsor that really, in spite of Peter trying to encourage him to say that there are improvements with the Toyota, saying really this is a circuit where we're not getting the best out of what we've got, and having had a few problems also, particularly with Ignatius' car. So Mika Salo shortly to go out on track.
Yes, great experience, of course, Mika Salo. That's a large reason that he was employed by Toyota. The value of that experience with many teams up and down pit lane, and now working with a new group of people, many of whom I'm sure he's worked with in the past at different teams. But it's getting a whole team to gel that's crucial. Now, on board with Takuma Sato, the aggressive, committed Japanese driver again, right onto the curb on that final corner. Let's just see, that does improve his time, and good effort. He puts him in 14th place.
But more importantly, it puts him ahead of his teammate Fisichella, who was in 14th. Fisichella is now down to 15th. So a very, very good performance from the young Japanese driver, who, remember, had limited running on Friday when his car stopped literally on the exit of the pit lane, and wasted the entire Friday morning session waiting to get his car back. So Sato doing a good job, but still the two Jordans not able to get at this point up into the top 10. I know that's going to be a big disappointment to the team, because they thought with the changes they've got here that they could sneak into the top 10 with certainly one of the cars, and even possibly two.
Well, it could still happen, John, as Frentzen gets the back end of the car out a little bit under braking, a bit like Montoya, but keeps it organised and sorted. It may still happen in qualifying. Remember, this session doesn't give us a particularly clear picture until perhaps the last few laps, and that will depend on how many tyres, how many new tyres they're prepared to use in the last moments of this session.
Well, Arrows currently are 10th and 11th, and now Fenton jumps up to 7th quickest, 1:19.5.34. Well done.
Yeah, and he gets congratulated by the team. Nice lap, and they are looking much more confident, it has to be said. Now on board with Ralf Schumacher here.
Ralf using lots of curb and bits beyond the curb, pushing very hard, not reflecting what we're seeing on our data screen. That's page 5 of your. So comes out of this long Kayaksa corner, then cuts back to the right. This two-part corner, you can hear traction control, but still struggling to find that front-end grip, but trying to use more aggressive driving style to compensate for lack of grip.
Well, remember, Ralf Schumacher is Michael Schumacher's nearest challenger in the World Championship. He's second in the points on 20 points, having had the one win in Malaysia, second place in Brazil, third last time out in San Marino.
We're watching Bernoldi, but in the meantime, his teammate Frentzen further improving on those first sector times, same in the second sector times. Bernoldi going quicker than he's done this morning, but so is his teammate.
So once again, the promising performance of the Arrows cars from yesterday is being repeated here through the last couple of corners. Let's watch Bernoldi, quick flick into the corner, very aggressive on the turn-in, but he has the confidence to be able to do that with the car, and that keeps Bernoldi in 11th place, a 1:19.7, just a fraction outside his previous best.
But Frentzen, who would have improved, again, as we saw earlier, has gone into the pits. There is Frentzen. We saw that with Felipe Massa when he was on a better lap. The team have pulled him in. Look at the amount of front camber on that front wheel in the Arrows. That's a lot of camber those cars are carrying.
So Frentzen back in, and hasn't always had a particularly good run here at the Barcelona track, although he did qualify in the front row back in 1997, and that was a very good year for this man. Jacques Villeneuve took the victory from pole position here in Barcelona when he was driving for Williams. Those days do seem an awfully long time ago, as he's still fighting to get BAR Honda onto that top step of the podium. Working the car hard, not having to correct too much through the quick ones. Let's see if this pushes him up.
He's gone 7th quickest. Good effort from BAR, but of course there'll be a low fuel run. Whether it was on brand new tyres, it's a very fresh set of tyres. Well, we can't tell from here. But for the Spanish fans, for Pedro de la Rosa, well, he's down in 15th place. The only good news for Pedro is he is once again ahead of his teammate Eddie Irvine.
Those inter-team rivalries coming to the fore in qualifying in particular, and we'll be watching those. Now let's watch Raikkonen, third fastest now.
Yes, good exit. That final turn 13. Raikkonen heavily committed now, ahead of his own teammate, and he's ahead of him by 1/10 of a second.
And we've got another car in the 18s at last, John. The Ferraris have been in the 1 minute 18 second bracket for quite a long time, but Kimi now just gets in there with a 1 minute 18.993. So the two McLarens now 3rd and 4th behind the Ferraris.
Giancarlo Fisichella has done it for Jordan. He's gone 6th quickest. He was down in the low teens. Suddenly Fisichella has found speed, he's found time, he's taken the fuel out, he's got probably fresh tyres on, and now we're getting a clearer indication of what the performance of the Jordan Honda is all about. 6th quickest.
Test driver, third driver, Mark Genet, keeps a close eye on proceedings down there in the Williams pits, as Jordan perhaps have a little bit more to smile about, with Fisichella showing the performance of the Jordan Honda with a 119.3, puts him just behind Felipe Massa, but ahead of Ralf Schumacher.
But then more importantly for Jordan is that they're ahead of the BAR, and they 6th place for Fisichella, 9th place for the BAR team with Villeneuve, and this ongoing war between the two Honda teams, not a war publicly, but you know, they need to be seen to be the dominant team. BAR feel in the same position.
Now watching Olivier, and there we are, Olivier sur le podium. Well, he's been on the podium here before. Can he try and do something special this weekend? They had a 3rd place finish for Villeneuve last year. It would be quite something, because Olivier hasn't managed to finish a race this year so far. Reliability problems have dogged him all the way. They have seemed to have got a handle on the reliability a bit more in the last few races, but he's always been the unlucky one.
Yes, but more importantly, I think for Panis, he's got the continuity of knowing that the team want him next year, whereas for the case of Jacques Villeneuve, we hear David Richards, team principal, saying, well, I'm not looking for rich, expensive drivers in my team. I want to get the team sorted out. I want to get the team to a competitive level, and then I'll think about going for the superstars. And where does that place Jacques Villeneuve?
Yes, but it depends on his contract, of course, as to whether he can actually move him somewhere else or end up still having to pay him. Might as well have him still driving if he's still got to pay the big bucks. And Jack's still driving very well. I have to say that last race at Imola was a good performance from Villeneuve, and really unfortunate that there weren't 1 or 2 more retirements and he didn't quite get in the points.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great race, a very strong race, the sort of race you'd expect to see from a driver with the name Villeneuve. And it's very disappointing when you put in that effort not to get the reward of that one single point. But if he keeps doing it, it'll come.
Looks as though Minardi are finally nearly ready to get Mark Webber back out. They're checking the setup on the front there. Mark's already getting his helmet on, so hopefully he'll be back out, because he's only done 4 laps this morning before that front wing broke so dramatically. Thankfully without any injury to him, but some damage was done to the car. Now, watch on board with Scotsman Alan McNish here.
Well, McNish has improved marginally. It's only a margin of 1 place up to 19th. And it's been a difficult session, a difficult Grand Prix weekend so far for the Scotsman. And again, using lots of curb and grass beyond, in an effort just to compensate for the overall lack of grip. Just use it, make the racetrack wider, see if that's any quicker.
Only a 10th off his experienced teammate Mika Salo, so once again McNish showing that despite perhaps his lack of F1 experience, he's still able to push the car very hard indeed, and just about match Mika Salo. Now, a moment or 2 ago we were looking at Olivier Panis on track, and Jacques Villeneuve. Jacques currently in 9th position, and I'm hoping that we can speak now to David Richards. David, can you hear me? David Richards, can you hear us down there in the pit lane? Well, we seem to have a little bit of a problem, still trying to reach David. Oh, Felipe Nasser gets...
I'm with you.
Ah, good. Thank you, David. We can hear you now. Excellent. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the performance of the cars. Olivier Panis was very quick yesterday, very impressive. Do you think that that can be repeated today?
Well, we've had a lot of time on this track, as has everybody else. So, and if you just look where everybody is now, if you look from 6th in the times down to 13th. They're split well, 0.3 of a second. So it's going to be about really getting it right on the day, and they've got sort of 4 cracks of that this afternoon. So hopefully they pull it all together.
Now, we've talked about the fact that both yourselves and Jordan use the same engine. How intense is that rivalry between the two teams for you?
Jordan is one of the other teams out there we have to beat, and no more different from anyone else there. And I suppose there's clearly a benchmark when you have the same power unit, but we've got a lot of other things there.
Well, we'll certainly keep an eye on how the cars get on this afternoon. Thank you very much, David, for joining us from the pit wall, and hope it goes well this afternoon.
Nick Heidfeld coming up to complete a lap, and Heidfeld goes second quickest for Sauber, splits the two factory Ferraris. What a time.
Well, that's very impressive indeed. A 1:18.144. Trying to listen up on the radio. But Nick Heidfeld showing that with Ferrari power and Bridgestone tyres, this Sauber chassis really is another great piece of work. They were 4th in the Constructors' Championship last year. That was a surprise to everybody that they maintained that pace all year long. And here they are once again.
Well, I think it just indicates what a fantastic job Ferrari do in building their engines. And although that's badged the Petronas engine, it is effectively the engine that Michael Schumacher was able to win his World Championship second time for Ferrari. And I mean, the Sauber chassis, and Nick Heidfeld, very underrated, somebody who I'm sure other teams in the pit lane are beginning to waken up to. But I mean, right on the limit. We saw Massa, well, in fact, this is Massa we're watching. This is a replay of Felipe Massa when he got it almost so far beyond recovery, and that was coming through 10s, 12 and 13. He's been right on the edge every lap we've seen him. Nick Heidfeld was a lot neater and cleaner and got the benefit of that by going second fastest.
I mean, we've been talking a lot about Felipe Massa over the course of this weekend. He's always dramatic to watch, but you know, last couple of races, John, Nick Heidfeld's done a very professional job. He hasn't always been the most dramatic in the free practices, but when it comes to qualifying, he out-qualified Felipe Massa last time out in San Marino. He qualified 7th, and remember, although Massa was one of the stars in Imola, Heidfeld had that extra pit stop. They made a bit of a mess on the pit stop. He came in when they weren't expecting him, and that was really the reason that Heidfeld didn't get a better result there.
Yes, they didn't get all the fuel in. That was really spoiled Heidfeld's race. So let's see what sort of response Ferrari can give. Rubens Barrichello is still fastest of all, but Heidfeld now splitting Barrichello and Michael Schumacher. As it looks like Michael Schumacher, in fact, just going down. In fact, it is Schumacher on a brand new set of Bridgestone boots. So guys, hold on to your seats. This is going to be a major lap, I predict, from Michael Schumacher. He's not going to be content to be 3rd quickest, particularly being outperformed by maybe, I think, the youngest German driver in this weekend's Grand Prix. That's Nick Heidfeld.
Yeah, German drivers doing a great job, of course, in Formula 1 at the moment. Not only Michael Schumacher, but his brother Ralf and Nick Heidfeld all going well, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen enjoying himself this weekend in the Arrows. He's currently in 10th position. Now we're watching Jarno Trulli in the Renault. He could do with a little bit more luck. Ooh, a little bit of a sort of slide coming out of the Banco de Sabadell corner, not quite as fast as these next two. And out of that final turn, he's currently down in 17th, and that keeps him down in that 17th position.
And teammate Jensen Button, who's up in 11th place. So whether Jarno Trulli has yet had the chance to go out and do that one simulated run, but Heinz-Harald Frentzen looking for improvements. He's seen personal bests, 1st and 2nd sector, currently 10th behind Jacques Villeneuve in the BAR. But it's the battle between all the smaller Bridgestone teams that really is going to be the focal point for the pit lane. Frentzen comes across the line and he goes 4th quickest.
He's also into the 1:18s, and that puts him ahead of both McLarens. It's ahead of Raikkonen, he's ahead of Coulthard, he's ahead of Felipe Massa, Fisichella and Ralf Schumacher. And at the moment, Williams are not showing their hand very strongly. They're 9th and 12th. Montoya down in 12th place currently. So in the McLaren Mercedes pit, David Coulthard having a look at those times and seeing the Bridgestone tired cars are dominating the top of the timesheets.
Michael Schumacher commences his 1st flying lap. This is a simulation qualifying lap. Let's enjoy it.
Oh, we got somebody off. That's Takuma Sato. Yeah, in a cloud of dust, and that's just behind where we saw Schumacher.
Well, that'll not affect Schumacher because at least he can complete his lap, but Sato has managed to get across the gravel, may have just kissed the barrier, but no serious damage. Olivier Panis, he improves to 8th position, so it's the beginning of the countdown, 10 minutes to go. But there we see they can probably remove that car safely. But the trouble is there will be a yellow flag there, so you are required to slow down on your previous best time.
Well, here he goes.
He just lost the back of the car, Ben.
Yeah, he lost it and went off, and you know, he's been off in every single session, not only here, but also at Imola. So he's maintaining a run of every single session from Imola, from the San Marino free practice sessions, qualifying, everything, through to here. And dear oh dear, he does not need this. Takuma needs to get some laps under his belt.
Well, Michael Schumacher's time, 1:18.651, will be a disappointment.
Surprise, I would have to say, as well.
I think so too.
Not that quick from Michael Schumacher on that lap. Now, the yellows shouldn't have affected him, as you say, because they were behind him effectively on the lap, but he's certainly backed off now.
Well, we got an indication that from that first sector time he was a tenth of a second down in Barrichello, and he went on to lose a further half a second around the lap, so well, maybe it isn't going to be that special for Michael. Maybe it's not going to be that easy for Michael Schumacher.
Takuma Sato walks away, and a bit of discussion
back on the other one.
going on down there in the Jordan camp.
Well, sounds like they may have taken a gurney flap off. That's a little return lift at the back of the rear top wing element, and what it does is it gives a very effective rear end grip, but you pay the penalty in top speed. Now, it sounds like Gary Anderson, technical director, saying put it back on the car. It may simply have been the case that Sato had that taken off, or he maybe was suffering a bit too much understeer, and the back end of the car just didn't provide the grip. Certainly it was the back end that he lost, and that's what took him off into the gravel.
Well, we're on board with Pedro de la Rosa here, and you know, Eddie's been fairly aggressive in getting rid of people over the last couple of weeks, John, who haven't performed for the team at the moment. Takuma Sato's not doing a brilliant job. He keeps falling off the road, doesn't he?
Yes, but I think to some degree Eddie brought Takuma Sato in, believing that bringing a young Japanese driver in would help his position with the Honda engine deal, and I don't think it's quite like that in reality, but it was in Eddie's mind at the time he did the deal.
So Mark Webber on track. Great to see that they finally got this car prepared after he had that front wing failure earlier on. He's last of all at the moment from his time he set in just a few laps this morning. I'm sure it won't take him long to improve on that. A 1:22.1 is current best. Alex Young is next slowest at a 1:21.700.
Mark Webber, of course, is going to have to go through a total rebalancing of the car, but I must say, looks pretty neat and tidy there, but on fairly fresh tyres, tucks the car in, is able to keep the car in. Now that we've not seen from many people. Of course, he's not at racing speed, but nevertheless, that's what you expect a car to do, dive straight back into the pits, and with just under 7 minutes remaining, he would like to get back out again before checkered flag comes out to complete the second 45-minute session.
But intelligent driving, he knows he hasn't got much time. He's got to go out, do maybe not a complete lap, get a feel for the car very quickly, come back in, say to the engineers, right, I need this, this and this, or it's doing this and I don't want it to, and they've got to be fast to make adjustments because he's running out of setup time here.
Look, Heidfeld's time, 0.0963, that is pretty good.
So Rubens Barrichello fastest, Nick Heidfeld second fastest, then Michael Schumacher, Frentzen, Raikkonen in 5th place, then Coulthard, Massa, Panis is 8th, Fisichella 9th, and Ralf Schumacher in 10th place.
Well, it's going to be the charge of the light brigade. We've got 2 cars out on track. In fact, they're all rushing out. Banoli's gone, Barrichello's gone, and Lemony looking down, and Mick Nish is also currently on track with just over 5 minutes remaining. I wonder whether everybody else is going to go at the same time and have that usual traffic jam of 20 odd cars, 21 cars, because of course Sato's car will not take part in these closing moments.
No, he's making his way back to the pits, so he's just going to have to watch and see what everybody does in these last few minutes of the session. Just over 5.5 minutes to go, as you say, and Rubens Barrichello still ruling the roost. He's done 15 laps in the 2 45-minute sessions that we've held so far, most laps have been completed by the looks of things by, in fact, the man who's on the back of the motorbike. Takuma Sato's completed 25 laps today before he went off just now, making up a bit for losing time yesterday.
Well, that little bit of change that we saw in the Ferrari, the team are just making an adjustment to Schumacher's front wing.
They changed the whole front wing, I think, where we've just learned that they've put a different front wing altogether.
Possibly because what we saw, that loss of half a second over the period of the lap, clearly was because he couldn't get the front end to tuck in. We've seen Barrichello's car look very, very well balanced indeed. And of course Barrichello likes a car that isn't a very twitchy front end of the car, whereas Michael can drive a car like that, but Barrichello's got a great balance in the Ferrari.
So we gather they're putting more gurney flap on the rear of the car as well. That's what we heard Gary Anderson talking about, and you mentioned just now with the Jordan. That'll give them a little bit more rear downforce. Now, Rubens looks tidy and neat. Now he's got this sort of double apex right-hander coming up.
But he's 0.6 of a second down on this lap, so no improvement for the Brazilian. As he comes into and goes through turn 13. Watch, the car looks so stable, the back of the car doing all the work but not giving the driver a hard time.
1 minute 18.800, so 3/4 of a second off his own personal best from earlier on in this session. Temperatures are coming up a little bit, that has a bearing as well on the situation, and track conditions, as we've mentioned throughout the weekend, can alter the lap times considerably here.
Another rear wing change. You see there's an adjustment on that top element there, that little black strip on the top of the wing, that's called a gurney flap. It's a reverse flap, it's an L-shaped flap, and they vary in sizes and depending on the speed of the circuit and the amount of downforce you want. It's a very cheap and dirty way of getting it. You pay a penalty in speed, but it does give the back end of the car more stability and therefore the driver more confidence. Felipe Massa out starting another lap. This man has been real entertainment all year.
So let's watch him now. Bit of correction in the middle of the right-hander. Coming up to the fourth corner.
22.9.894. He's about 100th of a second off what Barrichello did. That was the first sector time. If he can maintain this momentum through the final two sectors, he will leap from currently in 7th. He could end up top 3, top 4.
So let's watch him. Can he keep it tidy? Uses fair bit of curve there. Now the quick right.
He's got Frentzen ahead of him.
And uses the curve, but that was tidy. He kept his foot in, so power on. Now up to about 180 miles an hour. Down to second gear again here.
Ben, the problem is Frentzen's on an out lap. Well, Massa went rather wide. Frentzen will not want to let the Sauber go through. And this is going to spoil. Is he going to let him through? No, he's not. He's going to spoil Felipe Massa's lap. It should still be an improvement because he's up on this second sector as well. But how much the aerodynamics will affect him? Oh, he goes wide on the exit.
Well, we've heard how much difference it makes when you're following somebody closely here. Across the line, he still goes 6th. And he's being brought back in. So that could have been a lot better if he hadn't had the car in front, I'm sure, but he's still 6th fastest with that.
Jenson Button's gone 4th quickest in the Renault. He's done it while we were watching Felipe Massa and Hans-Hauer Frentzen. The first of the Michelin cars is a Renault, and it's Jenson Button.
And he's down into the 1 minute 18.4 second bracket. So everybody now getting a little closer to those Ferrari times that were set early in the session.
Coulthard personal best first, personal best second. Can David Coulthard pop it now up onto the front row of the grid? Probably unlikely. Second row of the grid, probably very accessible.
Let's take a look then, just 1.5 minutes of this session to go. David Coulthard goes 3rd, so it's Barrichello fastest in this free practice session that is about to come to its conclusion. Heidfeld 2nd and Coulthard 3rd.
Frentzen very quick in that first sector, again caught up behind traffic, and that's going to cause him to lose time. Mark Webber is not going to get out of the way, and now all of a sudden Frentzen's going to say, well, you know, my lap I would have been 4th, 5th quickest. It's been blown.
Yes, and that's a little bit strange. It looked like Webber was getting out of the way initially, and he's coming back in now, Frentzen.
Yeah, I think Webber really had nowhere to go. He got locked into that sort of turn 10, turn 11 phase of the circuit. Let's look again and see. Frentzen runs down Mark Webber. Now Webber could have gone offline.
Can I go through the pit lane and do another time lap? No, not enough fuel.
Well, in fact, Frentzen sort of, I think, was making a point.
Yeah, well, he heard it there. He asked if he could do another lap, and he hasn't got enough fuel, he's being told. And so he has to come back into the pits, and he'll have to wait for qualifying.
20 seconds or so remaining. Michael Schumacher starts his last lap, but watch for Montoya. He's also improving, currently 14th. He'll want to be a lot farther up than that.
Now let's watch Michael Schumacher and the Ferrari over what will be his last lap. Although, let's just see, out of the Repsol corner now, first split.
And he is fastest by over 1/10 of a second, and the fastest of all so far this morning.
So could this take Michael Schumacher ahead of Rubens Barrichello, just to finish off the free practice sessions here in Barcelona for the Spanish Grand Prix before the final preparations are made for qualifying? Through the left-hander, approaching the second split time at the end of this next straight, and let's take a look. He's down slightly on Barrichello's time.
Yeah, going through that left-right chicane, the front of the car looked like it had a lot of bite, and Michael couldn't commit, he couldn't make that turn, he couldn't get the car attitude, I felt, the way he liked it. He was having to wait on the throttle. He's lost time. Can he gain it back in these final three corners coming onto pit straight?
Likelihood is he's gone back out on that set of tyres we saw him put on earlier, so these have already done a few laps. 18.226. Well, I think he'll be pretty pleased with that. I don't think those were brand new as he went out this time. They've done about a couple of laps already, so to do an 18.2 on tyres that had already had a run, pretty impressive.
Yeah, and he clawed back a little bit of time that last sector as Kimi Raikkonen comes up to complete his final lap. Raikkonen now back down to 7th place. Oh, oversteer and turn 13, not something to be recommended.
Had to have pretty big lift there across the line, a 120.1. Kimi Raikkonen stays 7th with his 118.9 that he set a little earlier.
I think that the Iceman might have felt a bit of heat through his body after that little moment.
It certainly seemed to get away from in the middle. Well, the checker flag out on this session, and Barrichello ends as fastest on an 18.048. Frentzen a bit frustrated. He could well have moved up from 6th, I think, if he'd had a clear lap then at the end, but it didn't work out, and he'll just have to save it all up for qualifying this afternoon. Barrichello, Heidfeld, Michael Schumacher, our top three. So Ferrari powering the top three cars, all Bridgestone tired, but the fastest of the Michelin users, encouraging for David Coulthard, 4th fastest, just ahead of Jenson Button, with the Bridgestone arrows of Frentzen in 6th, and then Raikkonen.
Working okay with the changes we did, a little bit freer, yeah, okay.